Hey, I thought I'd film, I guess, what I affectionately call the murder wall, or perhaps the Blair Witch wall. Um, you see here, Angel. There's other names that are out of frame. There's a Satch, is right. Let me. Satch, right up there. Um, this is the foot. This is the bottom of the stairs into the basement. Every time I come down here, my office is down here. Uh, Office area, and I just always laugh because this place looks like the end of the Blair Witch Project down here. It's so creepy. But it felt like a good spot to shoot. Hi, I'm here to talk about a book. I'm actually going to shoot two book reviews back to back, and I'm trying to make sure that they're not going to be too long. And how I'm going to make sure is that it is 2:30 in the morning right now, and I'm fighting sleep, basically. I'm here to talk about a book. You know what book it is because it's in the title. We're talking about the lives of the monster dogs. But here's the spoiler. Stick around. It's going to be two videos. I'm going to cut it in half, but we're going to also be talking very soon. Pattern Recognition by William Gibson. But I reread Kirsten Bakis's Lives of the Monster Dogs. I read this book for the first time in 2018 when I was working at Barnes and Noble. I was working at Half Price Books, and not this exact copy, but this edition. My original copy of this book just disappeared at some point. I don't know what happened to it, but this book came across the buy counter, and this is the 20th anniversary paperback reissue of this with a new intro by the one and only Jeff Vandermeer, who we know and we love deeply here on the channel. But I didn't see this book when it came through. It was a friend of mine saw it, went, oh, what's this? Read the back, and then immediately was like, Rowan, this book sounds like something that you would like. And I read the back and I said, yeah, it sure does. And so I bought it and I read it and I fell head over heels for this book. It's one of my all-time favorites. I'm going to read the back to you right now. Why not? It hooked me in. After a century of cruel experimentation, genetically and biomechanically altered canines are produced by the followers of a 19th century Prussian surgeon. Possessing human intelligence, speaking human language, fitted with prosthetic hands, and walking upright, the monster dogs are intended to be super soldiers. Rebelling against their masters, however, and plundering the isolated village in which they were raised, the now wealthy creatures make their way to New York, where they become reluctant celebrities. Unable to reproduce and doomed to watch their race become extinct, the highly cultured dogs want no more than to live in peace, little suspecting that the real tragedy of their brief existence is only now beginning. Told through diaries, newspaper clippings, and even an opera excerpt, Kirsten Bakis's award-winning Lives of the Monster Dogs, blah, 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 blah. Right? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just like clearly, like, I'm a mark for this book. Like, there's just a lot of stuff in that plot synopsis that you're like we're ticking a lot of boxes. We've got weird shit. We got it's a strange premise, but a very intriguing one. I like to think that this book is, I mean, it's very obviously, and I don't think it's trying ever to hide it. This book is very indebted to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I think it's a very interesting sort of exploration of a lot of the same ideas and themes of Frankenstein, and how the creator, the originator of the ideas to create these monster dogs in the novel, he is a 19th century scientist, surgeon, and similar, ish to Victor Frankenstein. But then we have the book taking place in what was then the near future of the late 2000s. Like 2009, I believe, ish, is when the book takes place. And it's really interesting to see how those themes translate into a sort of modern world. The near futurism doesn't have very much play in the book at all. There's like few little mentions of like laser guns and other goofy little things, but it doesn't really matter. It could have been contemporaneous to this, but I think that the one thing that it does succeed with through pushing it 10 years into the future is that it's like, even though in the fiction the monster dogs have existed in the past and have existed for some time, the fact that we're in the future, we're in a speculative world, sort of allows, I think, you as a reader are more passive and more willing to give yourself over to the totally insane thing that this book is purporting, which is the existence of these dogs. I also, one thing I love about this is just a sort of preamble. The way that the dogs are described, they walk on their hind feet. They have prosthetic human hands. They wear the clothes of, the late 19th century Prussian upper class. So big, the dogs often wear these like military jackets. The female dogs will wear these big, billowing dresses and corsets and hair things. I don't know what the words are. And then they have these metallic voice boxes that are on their chest that they speak through. And when you try to kind of like imagine what that would actually look like functionally, they also often, like, they can't walk well, obviously, because their shit's all fucked up and they have to walk on their back legs and they're not meant for that. So they all carry like parasols that they use as canes too. And it's like, you think about if they tried to make a movie out of this book and they tried to depict these dogs on screen visibly, it would be so hard to pull it off. I feel like the genius here is that you can kind of let the impossibility of the dogs even existing just kind of wash away, because it's just words, right? It's easier to kind of not think about how wild and impossible it would be for these creatures to even exist the way they're purported to. So, the book, I'll say this up front. If what I've said so far is like very intriguing to you, just go read it. I really implore you. And I'm like, the Jeff Vandermeer cosign, if that intrigues you too, like if you have the information I did, which is the back of the book, and Jeff Vandermeer thinks it's fantastic, and me telling you that I think it's fantastic, if that's enough for you to read this book, go read it and maybe come back and you can watch the rest of this some other time. But I want to talk about it in depth a bit, which will require me to spoil the book, I think, functionally. So the book is a split narrative between a young woman named Cleo, who through sort of a series of happenstance winds up as the only human in the inner circle of the dogs. And she's writing in the first person about her experience, the dogs coming to New York City, being, their existence becoming known, the way that they integrate into the New York upper classes, then how she gets drawn into their circle, and then through to the end. And we know up front that something happens. She talks about how she, after what happened, people really wanted her to write about the dogs and know about the dogs. And it's been like 3 years, and she finally feels like she's ready to talk about the dogs and write about her experience with the dogs. Our other narrative is written in the voice of one of the dogs. His name's Ludwig. He is one of the older dogs, and he is the historian of the dogs. He is the one who feels it important to document their creator and their creation and the history of their race and the people who made them. And so we have this sort of current day narrative through Cleo, and then we have this historical origin of the dogs through Ludwig's story, that are running in parallel. The thing, the ultimate, I guess, theme or question that the book poses, that the thing that it feels the most concerned with, and the thing that I like the most about it, is it's very fixated on purpose. The purpose of us being a sentient creature, right? This is, man's search for meaning, all of that sort of stuff. This is not anything new, but the thing that's really interesting about it is that these are not people. These are not human beings. And everything is different for them because of that. And the dogs were created by this terrible, evil, deranged madman who didn't even successfully create them in his life, but built this cult around himself, and this idea he had of creating these sentient super soldier dogs, which they finally did, like 50 years after he dies in the mid 1900s. They finally successfully get these dogs to they augment them, they can walk, they can talk, etc., etc. They do it. And the reason that they are doing this, his original intent is for them to be soldiers, and for him to be able to command this army and, potentially do these sort of maniacal things with them. But then when he dies, his followers become obsessed with this idea of his spirit, almost like a Holy Spirit, and that his spirit moves through these dogs, and that when the dogs are complete, he will return in some Christ-like way. And these dogs are raised to believe this as well. They are created, quite literally, for a purpose, and the purpose is to kill. They are monsters by design. And what ends up happening, of course, is that they are slaves. And when they ultimately rebel, as they inevitably will, and they kill their masters, what they find is this plaguing of the loss of the spirit of their creator. They immediately realize that if they no longer serve this purpose from which they were created, they must find their own purpose, right? But on the other hand, the capability to propagate themselves, to make more dogs, is lost when they kill their masters. So they're doomed. There's no way for them to continue on. And it is such a profoundly sad prospect, a sort of despair that feels inhuman, because human beings by nature don't have this sort of, it's arguable. Like, we could talk about that we're destroying the habitability of Earth, right, for the future, but it's not the same. That's still ambiguous. This is very clear. And so what ends up happening is you have all of these different dogs with all these different personalities and all these different viewpoints on the world, who all feel a different way about what the purpose of their personal lives and them as a race of dogs should be. They come to America as immigrants because that's, the great story. You come to America because America welcomes you. And they are lavishly rich with all of these jewels that they've plundered from their masters. And they create these lavish celebrations, these thank you parades, and then they build this castle in the middle of Manhattan called New Hundland, or it's German, and all this stuff. And then they're it's very interesting because we've got, like, there's one of the major dog players is a dog named Klaus, who's the sort of mouthpiece for the dogs. He's their sort of de facto leader. He's the public face of the dogs. And he's very much like a glad-handing PR guy. He's the one who's like, we're having a parade, we're building this castle, and the castle's a gift to the people of New York, the greatest city in the world, blah, 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 blah. Then you've got Ludwig, who is this recluse. He doesn't see eye to eye with almost anybody. He is obsessed with the idea that the spirit of rank has left them, that they are purposeless, that his only purpose is to document their existence and their experience, because otherwise, like, what was the point of all of this? Whereas Klaus is just sort of like trying to kind of, I don't know, like, it's interesting how he sort of, it's almost like he doesn't want to think about it. And then the other major dog character is a female dog named Lydia, who becomes extremely close friends with Cleo, the primary narrator of the book. And as the book sort of winds its way down, tragedy starts to befall them. I guess I'll hold off from fully spoiling the whole thing, and just say that, like, it turns into this sort of prolonged sort of sinking of the Titanic, or like, it's almost like On the Beach, which I've never actually read, but I know enough about it to know that, which is a book about, like, nuclear war happens and everyone is dead everywhere except Australia, but there's been so many bombs dropped that it's just a matter of hours before the nuclear fallout comes and kills everybody, and then it's just about all these people in Australia being like, well, we're all going to be dead by tomorrow, so what do we do? It has that sort of somber tone by the end of this book. And it's very sad. It's very sad. It's very, very sad. But the thing that that shines throughout the whole thing is that fixation on the purpose, that fixation on the sort of divinity and vocation, right? I think that most people, especially if you're at least, like, moderately smart, struggle a lot of the time with that. I feel like I do more than a lot of people, but that not to get too in the weeds here, but I feel like that's mostly capitalism. Like, I know what I should be doing, but, like, I have to spend a bunch of fucking time running around in circles doing shit that I don't care about because I need to, like, eat food and, like, put gasoline in my car and shit like that. But we all really, I think we all really are plagued by that. I mean, it's like the ultimate question, but it's so fascinating to think about. I really think that she really, 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 really does a great job of creating these characters, these dog characters that are very much like a character, but she's really good at getting that just uncanny line where you always are like, this isn't a human being, though. This is a dog. This is a dog that can talk. And you can teach a dog how to eat with a fork. You can teach a dog, how to speak English or German. You can do all sorts of things like that, but they are still a dog. And I think that the moment when we learn the story of their liberation is one of the most enlightening, because it is this moment where they allow themselves to return to dogness, to their original state. They cast off all the things that have chained them, and they rip the throats out of the men, the women, and the children who have held them, have oppressed them for their whole lives, who have tortured them, literally, for their whole lives. And it's very tragic, it's very Shakespearean, and we learn that story in part through an opera. The dogs have an opera, and we read the libretto, near the back end of the book. We get to read that. There's this one I want to read one passage. I like reading passages and reviews. I think it's very helpful to hear some of the actual text. And it's from the first time that Cleo, not the first time she meets Ludwig, but the first time she goes to his apartment and they have like a actual conversation. I remember in Ronkstad, which I'm probably saying wrong. That's the secret city in the middle of the Canadian wilderness that they lived in. I remember in Ronkstad, he began slowly, in Ronkstad in the winter when I was a puppy. It was near Christmas time, I believe, and I was trotting alongside Prinzie von Sacker. She was the eldest daughter of my master's family. I was very young, 8 months perhaps, for I was still allowed to go on all fours. At 1 year of age, we had to begin to walk upright. I was going along beside Prinzie's skirt, a very long, big skirt, very noisy, so fascinating for a puppy. And her coat, she had such a wonderful coat, trimmed with fur. It was ermine. I wanted to chew on it, but of course I knew, so I used to just brush up against it with my muzzle and just open my mouth a little bit so that perhaps the fur would graze the edge of my tongue, and I could imagine exactly what it would be like to chew on it. So, but it must be very hard for you to imagine that street, Cleo. It was so different from anything here in New York. He looked at me as though he wanted an answer, but then he went on before I could have said anything. Horse dung and straw on the packed snow, the orange color of the lamplight, the smells of almonds and hazelnuts and honey and wheat, and the bloody sawdust spilling out from under the door of the butcher's shop, which one always wanted so badly to lick. But we went into the butcher's shop that day, he said, as if he was surprised to find himself back in the middle of his story. Yes, I saw the sawdust on the snow a few feet in front of us. And I thought to myself, I mustn't look at it too closely when we go by, or I won't be able to resist it. I told myself to concentrate on the skirt to my left, and I did. And then suddenly I ran straight into it because Prinzie had turned aside to go into the butcher's shop. And she kicked me a little with her foot, and I went around the door jamb, and I sat next to the wall as I was supposed to, and I was in agony. The shop was busy because it was Christmas Eve, I think, and so the floor had gotten very dirty. And all around me the blood, and scraps of twine covered with grease and feathers. My God, what happened to that world? It's all gone. I waited for Ludwig to continue, but he didn't. He had put his spectacles back on again, and he stood with his hands pressed against the wall behind him. He looked exhausted and slightly surprised, as if he had really been back in Ronkstad for a few minutes and had just returned. Is it really gone? I asked. Yes, of course. We destroyed it. He lifted his head and stared at me. That's what I'm talking about that, like, It's so interesting to you read. It is human words, human thoughts, but it is the dog. She gets it so right, and I don't think it is easy. I don't think I could pull this off. It feels like the kind of thing that it would be so easy to be schlocky, to be sort of asinine and tear jerky and whatever. It never is. She always kills it. The whole book. It is just such a somber and beautiful meditation on humanity and purpose and evil and beauty and creation. And I love this fucking book. It's one of my favorite books, and I implore you, you can pick up one of these paperbacks on Amazon right now for like $2 fucking. Just go do it. Like, why wouldn't you? Oh my God. And fun fact, so Kirsten Bakis wrote this book in the late 90s, and then never wrote another book, which when I read this, I was like, what the motherfuck, Kirsten, get your shit together, girl. But next year, February, I believe, of 2024, 26 years later, Kirsten Bakis coming back with book number 2. We're here for it. We're excited about it. I'm excited about it. I'm going to pre-order that motherfucker. I mean, it seems like the kind of scenario where it is very possible that she's going to completely fumble. Because that's like a long-ass time. But who knows? Maybe she's going to be the Terry Malick of weird, speculative horror fiction dog books. Or maybe not. That's all I have to say. Look at that. Raw footage, less than 30 minutes currently. We love to see it. Stick around. When I finish editing this one, I will now then be editing the next one, which will be, as I said, Pattern Recognition by William Gibson. Just banging them out. You're like, oh, you're reading so many books? Haha, joke's on you. I finished reading this book like a month ago. You just weren't seeing the parts that I cut out where I was sitting here looking through the book because I couldn't remember anybody's fucking name. Anyways, thanks for watching as always. If you're here because you subscribe to my channel because you like book stuff, thank you. Love it. If you're here because I posted videos of John Zorn playing and you don't know what's going on, dude, I'm so sorry. If you're here because you saw this one random video I made about the music board on 4chan like 3 years ago, which for some reason is like the one video of me talking about stuff that like constantly is getting traction and footage, people are watching, I don't know what to tell you. Probably you fucked up if that was the video you subbed off of. But I don't know. Last year I was like, I'm going to do a video about my favorite music that I listened to this year. And then I never did it. And this year I'm going to do it. But we'll see. Come back for Pattern Recognition.